Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the cut content of Spec Ops The Line. This will be tackling a concept similar to the previous episode, except we're going to be delving into the weapons that are in the final version of the game. In the beta, they had different designs. You can see some of these in trailers, like the M4 having a holographic sight, the TAR-21 having a red dot sight, and more recently, as a friend pointed out, the AK having a very different look to it. Some of these models are actually in the final game. All the models are in the 2010 multiplayer beta of Spec Ops, but surprisingly there are some models within the final game's files, textures, and everything for these cut versions of the guns. They're never used, but it's interesting that there are still remnants of them around. So let's just take a quick look through these and compare and contrast the differences. Because even the weapon selection icons are different. Some of the final ones reflect these original designs, actually. Starting out, the AA-12 is similar to the final version, it just has more of a desert camouflage look to it. And it's missing the damned 33rd's emblem on its side. The AK has some of the most radical changes. The wooden material appears less beat up here. There is no tape on the handguard or the butt of the gun. The magazine, though, instead of being the regular metallic one, it's a bakelite. I'm probably not saying that wrong. I'm probably saying that wrong. It's an orange magazine, two of them taped together. And you can see this in one of the trailers for the game. The selection icon doesn't include that taped mag, but the rest of the distinct design aspects are still there. A very different look for the gun. It makes it look more like the original AK-74 design from the Soviet-Afghan War. The Barrett M99 also had sort of a brownish, deserty look to it, compared to the final game's more gunmetal color scheme. It also lacked the damned 33rd's emblem on one of its sides. The Benelli M4, the M1014, it's about the same as it is in the final game, just a little more rusted in some areas. There's also a second duplicate model of the gun that's called the AA-14. I don't know if that was just a mistake on the developer's end, if it was a duplicate, or if it was cut reference to another gun that might have made. And among the game files, there are references to SPAS-15 in the beta. And the SPAS-15 is a real gun. It's a magazine-fed shotgun that behaves similarly to the SPAS-12, where you can switch between pump and semi-auto actions. That's also speculation, though. It's not clear if that duplicate Benelli M4 model was ever meant for anything. The FAMAS has some slight changes to it. The magazine appears to be more beat up and rusted, as does the rest of the weapon. It's also missing the ACOG sight and the damn 33rd emblem on it. So some pretty sharp changes. Wouldn't have had that scoped view in this version. Speaking of scoped views, the HK417 is mostly the same here. The only difference is that it doesn't have the dual use sight, where in the final game it has these two sights pressed together and one of them isn't used if you're just doing the regular aim. In this one it only has the ACOG sight. And it also has a black magazine instead of a silver one. It also appears a little more beat up than the final version. The UMP-45 had a foregrip in the beta version. This could be seen in trailers and in the weapon's pickup icon. Aside from that, it looks mostly the same compared to the final version. The only difference is that the final has more of a bluish color, while this is a darker, more black color scheme. The M4A1, as mentioned before, had a holographic sight instead of the strange double back sight setup it has in the final game. Barring that, though, it's pretty much the same. Looks pretty close to how it actually is, without that one change. The MGL, the MG32, or the M32 multiple grenade launcher, was meant to have a sight of its own, an optical sight, along with a foregrip. In the final version, it just has traditional grenade sights and no foregrip at all, so you hold it by its handguard. The Mossberg 590 is also a little rusted compared to the final one. It's not quite as upkept and clean and gray as the final version. It has more of a black and rusted silver look to it. The Groza was meant to have a foregrip as well. Seems like a lot of guns dropped that feature. Aside from that, it looks mostly the same. Its magazine is a different color. It's black instead of orange. It's sort of a reverse of the AK's changes. Because in the beta version for the Groza, it has a black magazine, and in the final version it is more of an orangish, brownish colored one. The M249 Saw is not as beat up as the final version of the game. It doesn't have the ropes holding it together. It isn't as rusted. It has black furniture on it. I mean, there's some hints of rust here and there, but it's in a lot better shape than the final version. The sawed-off shotgun, the W1300, also has a slightly better kept look to it. You can still see a lot of wear and tear on it, but it doesn't have the rope tied, it doesn't have the bands and tape holding this sawed-off grip together. The wooden material is also darker on the furniture. The Scar is an interesting one, because aside from not having the damn 33rds emblem on it, it also doesn't have a grenade launcher, at least for the preview icon. Note that this model actually appears briefly in the final game, in a cutscene where they're interrogating Gould in Chapter 7, but it isn't usable at all. The only time you can ever use a Scar is when it comes with an underbarrel grenade launcher. The Scout Tactical is also in a similar boat as the M249. It's not nearly as beaten up. There are no bands holding it together, no ropes or tape or anything. It looks pretty well kept. It has darker colors to its furniture, and aside from some scuffing along different parts of it, it looks pretty good. Looks like it's been held up better than the final version, whereas that has more of a makeshift look to it. TAR-21 has that distinct red dot sight that appeared in previous trailers. This model seems to exist in the final game, but the difference is that the holographic sight, the red dot sight, isn't there, which is odd. The true version of it that's used by Lugo and that Walker can also use, and the one that appears in multiplayer, that one also has that beat up, held together with tape and bands and everything look, whereas the preview version, the beta version, looks more well held together. It looks like it has the least amount of scuffing and rust and so on. The Vector, the TDI Vector, is pretty similar to the final version with a couple differences. It doesn't have the damn 33rd emblem like some other guns, and it also has a foregrip. Lastly, the Micro Uzi is mostly the same, it's just more rusted in the beta version compared to the final version. So with that in mind, it's kind of surprising. It looks like the art style is relatively similar, but it seems like the guns got a more of a distinct identity of their own instead of just being a little rusted in that version of the game. In the final, you can tell that these are held together with hope and prayers and tape for the most part. A lot of guns just look rusted or so beat up that it's shocking they could function. While this does add to the atmosphere of Spec Ops, it doesn't make sense for some guns, like why Lugo's TAR-21 in Scout or Adam's M249 Saw would be so beat up. You'd think that they would be walking into Dubai with the best quality weapons they could get. Or it could just be personal preference and customization. In all likelihood, it's probably just done on a technical standpoint to save on assets and not add too many distinct weapons to the list. It's neat, though, to see just everything that had changed from the previous version of the game to the final version. Something as simple as how a weapon would look, even if it functioned similarly. How do you guys think of these weapons? Do you think that they look better in the final versions, or do you think that Jaeger made the right call in changing their designs? I think, for the most part, I prefer the final designs, though I think that they should have given Lugo and Adams the beta versions of their guns, because I think they would have fit them better. So thanks for tuning in to another episode of the cut content of Spec Ops: The Line. Have a great one. Thanks for watching.